It was barely past 7 a.m. when Malcolm Price backed his pickup into the gravel lot at Lake Edgewood, just outside Brookfield, Tennessee. The early morning air still had that cool bite, and the lake was as still as glass, reflecting the soft pink streaks of sunrise. Malcolm, 48, had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. The night before, he'd carefully checked over his old but polished fiberglass fishing boat, packed his gear, and filled a thermos with black coffee. This lake wasn't just any patch of water. It was the same place his father used to bring him when he was a boy. He had just crouched down to unhook the trailer when he heard quick, determined footsteps crunching over the gravel. Looking up, he saw a woman in her late 50s, short bobbed hair, oversized sunglasses perched on her head despite the low sun. She clutched a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. "You can't park that here," she barked. No greeting, no smile. Malcolm straightened slowly. "Morning." "This lot is for community use only," she said, marching closer. "Lake Edgewood is private, for white, Edgewood Lakeside HOA members and the Edgewood Fishing Club. You need to move that boat." Malcolm kept his voice calm. "Don't see a sign." "There's one posted near the pavilion," she shot back. "Guess you missed it." Malcolm gave a small nod. "I've been fishing here plenty of times. Never had an issue." "Well, you've got one now." She tapped her pen against her clipboard. "Either you move that boat, or I call this in." "What's your name?" Malcolm asked evenly. "Margaret Duvall. I'm on the HOA board." She stood taller, clearly expecting her title to mean something to him. "And yours?" "Malcolm Price." She scribbled it down like she was taking down a license plate. "Is that boat registered to you?" "It is." "Well, Malcolm, I'm sure you're just unaware of the rules. But we've had problems before. Trash, property damage, people breaking things. The area's for residents and their guests, under supervision." He caught the way she said, "people," the way her gaze lingered, and it told him more than her words did. "I'm not breaking anything," Malcolm said, locking eyes with her. "Pack it up and leave. Now." There was a long pause. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "You sure you want to push this?" "Excuse me? You might want to double-check your information," he said slowly. "I think you're mistaken about who owns this lake." Margaret actually laughed, sharp and loud. "Is that supposed to intimidate me?" Malcolm didn't flinch. "Do you know who bought this lake 3 years ago? Who maintains it? Pays the taxes?" For a second, her face twitched with uncertainty. Then it was gone. "You're bluffing." Malcolm clipped the line back to the boat hitch. "All right. You do what you have to do." She smirked. "Oh, I will." What Margaret didn't know was that Malcolm wasn't bluffing, and she'd just picked a fight she couldn't win. All right. Here's Part 2 of 4 500 words. Continuing right from where we left off. By 9 a.m., Malcolm was out on the lake, anchored near the lily pads at the far eastern edge. The sun had risen, higher, painting the water gold. He sipped his coffee, letting the silence settle over him. That silence didn't last. From across the water, he spotted a white HOA golf cart bouncing down the gravel path toward the dock. Even from a distance, he recognized the stiff posture. Margaret Duvall. But this time, she wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was a man in a navy windbreaker with a radio clipped to his belt. They stopped at the end of the dock. Margaret planted her feet like she was presiding over a courtroom. "Malcolm Price," she shouted, voice sharp across. "The water. This is your final warning." Malcolm reeled in his line, turned in his chair, and raised a hand. "Morning again, Margaret." "I've contacted the sheriff's office," she announced. "You're in violation of HOA regulations. Leave the premises immediately." The man beside her shifted uneasily. "Sir," he called out, "are you a resident here?" "Nope," Malcolm said calmly. Then I'm going to have to ask you to bring your boat in. Do you have a badge? Malcolm asked. Or just the walkie? The man hesitated. I'm contracted security for the HOA. Malcolm nodded slowly. Then you might want to know something before you start telling me to leave. Margaret's arms crossed tighter. Here we go. This lake isn't owned by your HOA, Malcolm said evenly. It belongs to Edgewood Holdings Trust. Bought and paid for 3 years ago, and I'm the sole trustee. Margaret scoffed. You expect us to believe that? Don't care if you believe it, Malcolm replied. The paperwork's public record at the county office. Your fishing club only has access because the trust granted it, annually. And funny thing, no renewal's been filed this year. The Bicky, young guard looked at Margaret. Is that true? Margaret glared at him. Don't listen to this. It's true, Malcolm cut in. And it means, right now, your fishing club's on my property without permission. Margaret's voice rose. That lake has been part of this community for decades. My father fished here. My kids swam here. Out of generosity, Malcolm said. The previous owners allowed it. My father honored it too. But generosity can be withdrawn when people forget their manners. Her jaw tightened. You think you can just cut everyone off because I called you out? I'm not cutting anyone off, Malcolm said quietly. Not yet, but you're making a strong case for it. They stared at each other across the water, neither blinking. When Malcolm turned back to his fishing rod, Margaret's face burned with frustration. The security guard muttered something to her, but she spun on her heel and stormed off. Malcolm knew this wasn't over. By the time he headed home that afternoon, the tension on the shoreline was thicker than the humidity, and he'd already decided it was time to pull the HOA's leash. Malcolm's house sat 10 minutes from the lake, a modest single-story ranch tucked behind a row of pecan trees. When he pulled into the driveway, his old hound, Duke, was waiting on the porch. Inside, Malcolm hung his keys, kicked off his boots, and went straight to the hallway filing cabinet. From the bottom drawer, he pulled out a blue folder labeled Lake Edgewood, Title and Access Agreements. He spread the papers across his dining table. The first page was the deed, clear as day, listing Edgewood Holdings Trust as the owner, with his name signed as trustee. Behind it, the original agreement between the trust and the Edgewood Lakeside HOA. The terms were simple. The HOA's fishing club had annual conditional access to the lake, renewable only by written agreement. Renewal date, 10 months overdue, Malcolm sat back, a slow smile creeping in. Guess they forgot who they were dealing with. The next morning, he stopped by the Brookfield County Recorder's office. He didn't need to. His own records were airtight, but he wanted everything stamped and official. The clerk pulled up the parcel records, confirmed ownership, and printed him fresh copies. Back home, Malcolm drafted a letter to the HOA board. It was short, professional, and impossible to misinterpret. Effective immediately, community access. To Lake Edgewood via the Edgewood Lakeside HOA and affiliated clubs is suspended. Unauthorized use will be considered trespassing. Malcolm Price, trustee, Edgewood Holdings. Trust. He attached copies of the deed, the expired agreement, and a notarized statement confirming his role. No anger, no insults, just facts. By mid-afternoon, he drove the envelope straight to the HOA's beige one-story office at the subdivision's gates. The receptionist looked startled when he handed it over. "Do you need a receipt?" she asked. "Just make sure. Margaret sees it," Malcolm said, then walked out without another word. That evening, his phone rang. "Unknown number. Mr. Price?" a man's voice asked. "This is, Robert Lane, acting president of the HOA board. We received your letter today. I think we should talk before this escalates." "Nothing's escalating," Malcolm said. "The agreement expired. I've just brought it back in line with the terms." Robert hesitated. revoking access completely. It's going to upset people. This lake has been part of the community for generations. And I haven't interfered until now, Malcolm replied. But after the way your board member approached me last weekend, I think it's best we take a break. Maybe we can meet, find a compromise, Robert suggested. Malcolm sipped his water. Let's see how folks handle a little humility first. He hung up without waiting for a reply. What he didn't know was that by the next morning, his letter would be the hottest topic in Brookfield, and the HOA was already scrambling. By Wednesday morning, Malcolm's letter had made the rounds. Copies were passed out at backyard barbecues, forwarded in neighborhood group chats, and whispered about on morning dog walks. Some folks reached out quietly, like Earl Johnson, a neighbor from down the road who stopped him at the feed store. Not. All of us are siding with Margaret, Earl said, shaking his head. She's been telling people what they can and can't do for years. Guess she finally told the wrong man. But others weren't subtle. Someone stuffed an anonymous flyer in Malcolm's mailbox, accusing him of destroying community traditions and hinting he was going to sell the lake to a developer. By Friday, the HOA called an emergency board meeting at the Edgewood Community Center. Word spread fast. By the time Malcolm arrived, the parking lot was full and folding chairs were being dragged out of closets to seat the overflow crowd. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Margaret sat dead center in the front row, arms crossed, chin high, like she was ready for battle. The rest of the board sat at a long table up front.